I still remember the exact sound Nathan's sneakers made against our kitchen floor that Thursday afternoon, 9 years ago. Squeaky, uneven. The left sole had been coming loose for weeks, but Jennifer kept saying she'd take him shoe shopping next weekend, a promise that stretched into months like everything else she said about caring for her son. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. He was 7 years old, sitting at my kitchen table with his math homework spread out like a puzzle he couldn't solve, not because the work was hard, but because his mind worked differently than other kids. The teachers called it ADHD. Jennifer called it a problem. "Grandpa Frank, why do the numbers keep moving around?" Nathan asked, pressing his small hands against his temples. His dark hair stuck up in all directions, and his shirt was inside out because Jennifer had rushed him to school that morning without checking. I knelt beside his chair, pointing to the addition problems with my finger. "They're not moving, buddy. Your brain just sees them differently. That's not bad, it's special." Mama says special is just another word for broken. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I looked at this beautiful child, my grandson, repeating the poison his own mother had fed him. Jennifer had been saying things like that for months, but hearing it from Nathan's 7-year-old mouth made my blood boil. That's when I heard her car in the driveway, the engine of her beat-up Honda Civic, the one I'd helped her buy when Nathan was a baby because she claimed she needed reliable transportation for all his doctor appointments. Appointments that happened maybe twice a year, and only when the school demanded them. Jennifer burst through my back door without knocking, her face flushed and her eyes wild. She wore her waitress uniform from the diner, but her shift didn't end until 6. It was barely 3:30. "I can't do this anymore," she announced, not even looking at Nathan. Her voice carried that familiar edge of hysteria she'd perfected over the years whenever life required actual responsibility. Nathan's pencil stopped moving. I watched him go very still, the way children do when they sense danger approaching. "Do what, Jennifer?" I asked, though my stomach was already dropping. "This." She gestured vaguely toward Nathan without actually looking at him. "The phone calls from school, the complaints from teachers, the stares from other parents, everyone looking at me like I'm a failure because my kid can't sit still or pay attention like normal children. Nathan's not abnormal. He needs more than I can give him." Jennifer's voice cracked, but not with sadness, with anger. "I'm 22 years old, Dad. I should be figuring out my own life, not dealing with a child who requires special everything. Special classes, special attention, special patience I don't have." Nathan hadn't moved from his chair, but I could see his little hands trembling around his pencil. 7 years old, and he was already learning that his existence was a burden to the person who was supposed to love him most. "Jennifer, sit down. Let's talk about this calmly." "No." She shook her head violently. "I've made my decision. I've been thinking about it for months, and I can't pretend anymore that I'm cut out for this. Nathan needs someone who can handle his issues, someone who has patience for all his quirks and problems." "What exactly are you saying?" Jennifer finally looked at Nathan, and what I saw in her eyes still haunts me. Not love, not even guilt, just exhaustion and resentment, like she was looking at a broken appliance she couldn't afford to fix. "I'm saying he's better off with you. You're retired, you have time. You actually seem to enjoy dealing with his hyperactivity and his learning problems and all the drama that comes with having a special needs child." "Jennifer, I've already packed his things." She pulled car keys from her pocket. "They're in my trunk. His clothes, his toys, his medications, everything." The kitchen went completely silent, except for the tick of my wall clock and Nathan's shallow breathing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my daughter, the little girl I'd raised to believe family meant everything, standing in my kitchen and abandoning her own child like he was an unwanted pet. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Jennifer's voice went cold, final. "I tried, Dad, I really tried, but every day with him is like drowning. The phone calls from school about his behavior, the other mothers looking at me with pity, because my son disrupts their precious children's learning. The way he never stops moving, never stops asking questions, never just sits quietly like normal kids." Nathan made a small sound, barely audible. When I looked at him, tears were rolling down his cheeks, but he wasn't sobbing. He was crying silently, like he'd learned not to make noise when his mother was angry. "Mama," his voice was so small. "Did I do something wrong?" Jennifer flinched like he'd slapped her. For just a second, I saw something that might have been regret cross her face, but then her expression hardened again. This isn't about you doing something wrong, Nathan. This is about me not being the right person to be your mother. Grandpa Frank loves you more than I ever could. He's better at this than I am. But when are you coming back? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Jennifer looked at me, then at Nathan, then back at me. Her lips moved like she was trying to form words, but nothing came out. Jennifer, I said quietly, answer your son. I'm not coming back. The words fell like stones. This is better for everyone. You get the grandson you always wanted to spoil, and I get my life back. Nathan gets someone who actually wants to deal with his problems. Nathan slid off his chair and walked to his mother. 7 years old, barely reaching her waist, looking up at her with those big brown eyes that looked exactly like hers. Please don't leave me, Mama. I'll be good. I promise I'll sit still in school. I won't ask so many questions. I'll try harder. Jennifer stepped backward, putting distance between herself and her son. It's not about being good, Nathan. It's about me not being able to be the mother you need. But I need you. His voice broke on the words. You're my mama. Frank will take better care of you than I ever could. He has patience for children with challenges. That word. Challenges. Like loving her own child was some impossible task instead of the most natural thing in the world. I knelt down and pulled Nathan against my chest, feeling his small body shake with suppressed sobs. Over his head, I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a stranger, someone who could walk away from unconditional love because it required effort she wasn't willing to give. Jennifer, you'll regret this. He's your son. He's better off without me. She was already moving toward the door. His school stuff is in the folder on top of his clothes. His medications are in the side pocket of his backpack. He has an appointment with Dr. Martinez next month about adjusting his ADHD medication. You're really doing this? I'm doing what's best for everyone. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. For a moment I thought she might change her mind, turn around, apologize, be the mother Nathan deserved. Instead she said, tell him I love him, but love isn't always enough. And then she was gone. The sound of her car starting, backing out of my driveway, driving away from her son forever. Nathan and I stood in my kitchen, holding each other while the afternoon sun slanted through windows that suddenly felt like they belonged to a different world. Grandpa Frank? Nathan whispered against my shirt. Why doesn't Mama want me? I had no answer that wouldn't destroy what was left of his 7-year-old heart. So I held him tighter and promised myself that he would never ever feel unwanted again. That was 9 years ago. 9 years of proving that love actually is enough when it's real. The basement had always been Nathan's refuge. When he was 8, I'd cleared out half of it and set up a small desk where he could do homework without distractions. By 10, he'd convinced me to let him move my old computer down there, a dinosaur Dell that took 5 minutes just to boot up. By 12, he was building his own computers from parts he bought with birthday money and the allowance I gave him for helping with yard work. Now, at 16, Nathan's basement setup looked like something from a science fiction movie. 3 monitors, 2 custom-built computers, cables snaking everywhere, and the constant hum of cooling fans that had become the soundtrack of our house. He spent hours down there every day after school, and I'd learned not to ask too many questions. The kid needed space to be himself, and if that meant surrounding himself with technology I barely understood, so be it. What I didn't realize was that he'd been working on something big, something that would change everything. It was a Tuesday evening in March when he finally told me. I was upstairs making dinner, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and meatballs, when I heard his feet on the basement stairs. He emerged looking nervous, which was unusual for Nathan. Over the years, he'd grown into a confident teenager, sure of himself in a way that came from knowing he was loved unconditionally. Grandpa Frank? He stood in the kitchen doorway, fidgeting with something in his hands. Can we talk? I turned down the heat under the sauce and gave him my full attention. Of course, what's on your mind? Nathan held up what looked like a smartphone, except the screen was showing charts and numbers that moved constantly. I've been working on something for the past 2 years. I wanted to wait until I was sure it actually worked before I told you about it. What kind of something? He took a deep breath, the way he used to do before admitting he'd broken something. A trading application for the stock market. It uses artificial intelligence to predict price movements based on patterns that humans usually miss. I blinked. You built that? Down in our basement? The hardware is just regular computers, but the software, that's all me. I've been studying market behavior, reading everything I could find about algorithmic trading, teaching myself programming languages I needed to make it work. His words came faster as he got excited. Most trading algorithms look at obvious patterns. Mine looks deeper, at micro fluctuations and cross-correlations between seemingly unrelated data points. I understood maybe half of what he was saying, but I could see the passion in his eyes. This wasn't just a hobby project. This was something he'd poured his heart into. How do you know it works? Nathan grinned, and for a second, he looked like the 7-year-old boy who used to get excited about solving math problems. Because I've been testing it with small amounts for 6 months. Really small, like $50 at a time, money from my allowance. The algorithm has been profitable 87% of the time. Profitable how much? On average, about 15% return per week. I nearly dropped the spoon I was holding. I didn't know much about investing, but I knew enough to understand that 15% per week was extraordinary. Nathan, are you sure about these numbers? I've triple-checked everything. The algorithm identifies opportunities that last only minutes or hours, tiny price discrepancies that it exploits before the market corrects itself. It's not gambling, Grandpa. It's mathematics. I looked at this teenager, my grandson, who'd been abandoned by his mother for being too difficult, and realized he'd quietly become something remarkable. Why are you telling me this now? Nathan's expression grew serious. Because I think it's ready for real testing. Not $50 experiments, but actual money, enough to prove whether this could be under significant. How significant? If I'm right about the scalability, we could be looking at substantial returns. Life-changing returns. He paused. But I need your permission. I can't open the kind of trading account I need until I'm 18, and even then, I'd want you to know what I'm doing. I turned off the stove completely and sat down at our kitchen table. Nathan sat across from me, still holding his phone with those constantly moving numbers. 9 years of raising this boy, 9 years of watching him struggle with a world that didn't understand how his mind worked, and he'd been down in our basement creating something that could transform our lives. What would you need from me? Your name on the account, your signature on the paperwork, and, he hesitated, about $10,000 to start with. I know it sounds like a lot, but the algorithm needs a certain minimum to work effectively. The mathematics only scale properly above that threshold. $10,000. I thought about my savings account, built up slowly over 9 years of careful living. The money I'd been setting aside for Nathan's college, for emergencies, for the uncertain future of a 67-year-old man raising a teenager alone. If this doesn't work, we lose that money. Yes, Nathan met my eyes directly. But Grandpa, I've been testing this for months. I've stress-tested it against historical data going back 15 years. I've run scenario analyses for market crashes, bull runs, sideways trading periods. The algorithm adapts to changing conditions. I studied his face. This wasn't the impulsive enthusiasm of a teenager with a get-rich-quick scheme. This was careful, methodical confidence from someone who'd done his homework, someone who understood the risks and believed in his work anyway. What does your gut tell you? I asked. Nathan smiled. My gut tells me that being abandoned by my mother was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it meant I got to grow up with someone who taught me that love means believing in people even when they don't fit into normal categories. Someone who showed me that being different isn't being broken. The emotion in his voice caught me off guard. We didn't talk about Jennifer very often anymore. By unspoken agreement, we'd built our life around the family we'd chosen, rather than dwelling on the one that had failed us. I spent 2 years building this because I wanted to prove something, Nathan continued. Not to the world, not to teachers who said I couldn't focus, and definitely not to my mother. I wanted to prove it to myself, that my brain being different could be an advantage instead of a problem. And what did you prove? That the same mind that can't sit still in a classroom can see patterns in market data that Nobel Prize economists miss. That the hyperactivity that made me a problem child actually helps me process multiple data streams simultaneously. That every single thing Jennifer saw as wrong with me is actually why this algorithm works. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. For 9 years I'd been focused on helping Nathan survive, making sure he felt loved, helping him navigate school, protecting him from a world that didn't always appreciate his differences. I'd never imagined he was doing more than surviving. He was preparing to excel. Tell me exactly how this would work. Nathan pulled out a folder I hadn't noticed him carrying. Inside were printed reports, charts, and documentation that looked more professional than anything I'd seen from major corporations. We open a joint trading account. I have complete discretion over the trading decisions, but you maintain oversight as the primary account holder. The algorithm runs automatically most of the time, but I monitor every transaction to ensure it's performing as expected. And if something goes wrong, we have stop-loss protocols built in. If the algorithm starts performing outside expected parameters, it automatically limits losses and alerts me to shut down. The most we could lose in any single day is 5% of the account value. 5% of $10,000. $500 maximum daily loss, protecting the bulk of our investment even in worst-case scenarios. I'd seen retirement accounts lose more than that during routine market fluctuations. Nathan, this sounds almost too good to be true. I know it does. That's why I spent 2 years testing it before I said anything. But Grandpa, the mathematics are solid. The market inefficiencies I'm exploiting aren't illegal or unethical. They're just opportunities that exist for microseconds before other algorithms or human traders notice them. I looked at the folder of documentation, at the phone still showing those constantly shifting numbers, at my grandson's earnest face. 16 years old, and he'd created something that could secure our future. What happens if this actually works, if we make significant money? Nathan's expression grew thoughtful. Honestly, I haven't thought much beyond proving the concept works, but... He paused. But I guess it would mean we'd never have to worry about money again. College would be paid for. You could stop worrying about retirement. We could fix up the house, take vacations, maybe even help other people. Other people. Even when contemplating success, Nathan's first thought was about generosity. 9 years of watching me stretch every dollar to provide for him, and he wanted to help others. There's something else I should tell you, Nathan said quietly. Something I've never mentioned. What's that? I still remember everything about that day Mom left. Every word she said, every look on her face, every excuse she made for why she couldn't handle being my parent. His voice remained steady, but I could see old pain flickering in his eyes. For 9 years I've carried that around. The knowledge that the person who was supposed to love me unconditionally gave up on me because I was too difficult. Nathan, let me finish. He held up his hand. I've carried that around, but I've also carried around something else. The memory of you kneeling down and holding me while she drove away. The memory of you telling me I was special, not broken. 9 years of proof that she was wrong about everything. I felt my throat tighten with emotion. This algorithm, this project, it's not just about money. It's about showing the world that the kid Jennifer threw away was worth something after all. That maybe being difficult and different and too much work actually made me capable of something extraordinary. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. Nathan, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're already extraordinary. I know that now, because you made sure I knew it. He squeezed my hand. But wouldn't it be amazing if the very traits that made my mother abandon me turned out to be exactly what we needed to build something incredible together? I looked at this remarkable young man, my grandson, and made my decision. When do we start? The call came on a Thursday morning in September, exactly 6 months after Nathan and I had opened that trading account. I was in the kitchen making coffee when my phone rang, displaying a number I hadn't seen in over 2 years. My stomach dropped before I even answered. Hello, Dad. Jennifer's voice sounded different, smoother, more confident than the desperate 22-year-old who'd abandoned her son in my kitchen 9 years ago. Jennifer. I kept my voice neutral, though my heart was already racing. This is unexpected. I know it's been a while since we talked, but I've been thinking about Nathan lately, about how he's doing, whether he's happy, if he needs anything. Her tone carried a false warmth that set every alarm bell in my head ringing. I glanced toward the basement door where Nathan was probably already at his computers, monitoring the algorithm that had performed even better than he'd predicted. In 6 months, our initial $10,000 had grown to over $400,000. We'd been careful, reinvesting profits and scaling up gradually, but the returns had been consistent and remarkable. More importantly, we'd been quiet about it. Nathan had insisted on absolute discretion. No flashy purchases, no lifestyle changes that would attract attention. We'd paid off my mortgage, set aside money for his college, and invested the rest conservatively while the algorithm continued generating steady returns. Apparently, we hadn't been quiet enough. "Nathan's doing very well," I said carefully. "He's thriving in school, working on some interesting projects. He's grown into an exceptional young man." "I'm so glad to hear that. You know, I've really matured over these past few years. I've been seeing a therapist, working through my issues, understanding why I made the choices I did back then." Jennifer's words sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced this conversation. I realize now that I was just overwhelmed and scared. I wasn't ready to be the mother Nathan deserved. "And now you think you are?" "I think I'm ready to try. I think Nathan deserves the chance to have his mother back in his life, don't you? He's 16 now, old enough to understand that people make mistakes, that sometimes we need time to grow into our responsibilities." I poured my coffee with hands that were steadier than I felt. 9 years. 9 years of Nathan asking why his mother didn't want him. 9 years of helping him work through abandonment issues. 9 years of watching him build his self-worth from nothing because the person who should have loved him unconditionally had walked away. "What exactly are you proposing, Jennifer?" "I'd like to see him. Maybe we could start with coffee, just the two of us. Let him get to know the person I've become. I think he might be surprised at how much I've changed." "Have you changed? Or have circumstances changed?" A pause. "I'm not sure what you mean by that." "I mean that for 9 years, you've had my phone number. You've known exactly where Nathan was living, exactly where to find him if you'd wanted to be part of his life. But you didn't want to when he was 7 and struggling with ADHD. You didn't want to when he was 10 and being bullied at school. You didn't want to when he was 13 and asking difficult questions about why his mother abandoned him. Dad, that's not fair. But now, suddenly, when he's 16 and has figured out how to make something of himself, despite everything you put him through, now you want to be his mother again. So I'll ask you one more time. What's changed?" The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its practiced warmth. "I heard he's doing well for himself, financially well." There it was, the truth underneath all her therapeutic language about growth and maturity. Someone had told her about the money. "Who told you that? Does it matter?" "The point is, I'm his mother. I have rights, Dad. Legal rights that don't just disappear because of past mistakes." "Rights?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You gave up your rights when you walked out of my kitchen 9 years ago. You can't abandon a child and then come back when it's convenient. I never legally terminated my parental rights. I placed Nathan in your care temporarily while I got my life together. That's very different from abandonment." The calculated coldness in her voice made my blood run cold. This wasn't a reformed woman seeking reconciliation. This was someone who'd done her homework, consulted lawyers, prepared for a battle. "Temporarily? Jennifer, you told your 7-year-old son you weren't coming back." I was young and overwhelmed. I said things I didn't mean. But the legal reality is that I'm still Nathan's biological mother, and no court is going to ignore that relationship, especially when I can demonstrate that I've addressed the issues that led to our separation. Our separation. Like she'd had a temporary disagreement with her son instead of abandoning him for nearly a decade. "What do you want?" "I want to rebuild my relationship with my son, and I want to make sure his financial interests are being properly protected. A 16-year-old shouldn't be making major monetary decisions without proper legal oversight. He's not making those decisions alone. You're 67 years old, Dad. You're not a financial advisor or an investment professional. If Nathan has come into significant money, he needs proper legal representation to ensure his interests are protected. As his mother, I have a responsibility to make sure that happens." I closed my eyes, feeling the walls closing in. She wasn't just coming for Nathan. She was coming for everything we'd built together, everything he'd accomplished with his brilliant mind and his relentless determination. "I need to think about this, Jennifer." "Of course you do. But, Dad, I really hope we can work this out as a family. I'd hate for this to become a legal matter that could be traumatic for Nathan. Courts can be so difficult for children, even teenage children." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Cooperate, or face a custody battle that would tear Nathan's life apart. "I'll call you back. I'll be waiting." "Oh, and Dad? You might want to discuss this with Nathan soon. I'd hate for him to hear about my return from someone else." She hung up, leaving me standing in my kitchen with a cold cup of coffee and the sinking realization that our quiet, successful life was about to be destroyed. I was still standing there when Nathan emerged from the basement, laptop in hand and excitement in his eyes. "Grandpa Frank, you need to see this. The algorithm just identified a pattern in the semiconductor sector that could net us another 50,000 by end of week. The volatility indicators are perfectly aligned with our profit parameters. He stopped when he saw my face. What's wrong? I looked at this remarkable young man, my grandson, who'd overcome so much and achieved so much, and realized I was about to have to tell him that his worst nightmare was coming true. The mother who'd abandoned him was coming back, not out of love, but out of greed. Nathan, we need to talk. Your mother called. I watched the color drain from his face, watched him set his laptop down carefully on the counter, like he was handling something fragile. What did she want? She wants to see you. She says she's changed, that she's ready to be your mother again. Nathan's laugh was bitter and sharp. 9 years too late. There's more. She knows about the money, Nathan. She knows you've been successful, and she's talking about legal rights and proper oversight and making sure your financial interests are protected. She wants the money. I think so, yes. Nathan walked to the kitchen window and stared out at our backyard, where I'd taught him to throw a baseball, where we'd built a treehouse that he'd outgrown years ago, but that still stood as a monument to better times. What kind of legal rights does she have? I don't know. But she's threatening to take this to court if we don't cooperate. Nathan turned back to me, and something in his expression had changed. The shock was gone, replaced by something calmer and more calculating. Grandpa Frank, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've never mentioned because I hoped I'd never need to. What's that? I've been expecting this day for a long time. Ever since the algorithm started working, ever since we started making real money. I knew that someday, somehow, she'd find out and come back. You've been expecting it. Nathan walked to our junk drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder I'd never seen before. I've been preparing for it, because I remembered what you taught me when I was little, that sometimes people don't change, they just get better at hiding who they really are. He held up the recorder. This has been in my backpack every day for 2 years, just in case. Just in case what? Just in case my mother ever tried to come back and pretend she'd been a loving parent all along. Just in case she ever tried to rewrite the history of what she did to me, what she did to us. I stared at him. Nathan, what are you planning? For the first time since I'd known him, my 16-year-old grandson smiled with the cold confidence of someone who'd learned to play chess while everyone else was playing checkers. I'm planning to remind her exactly who she's dealing with, and exactly how much evidence exists of who she really is. The boy who'd been abandoned for being too difficult was about to show his mother just how difficult he could actually be. Nathan insisted we meet Jennifer at Morrison's Diner on 5th Street, the same place where she'd worked when she abandoned him 9 years ago. I thought it was a strange choice, but Nathan had that calculating look in his eyes that told me he had a plan. We arrived first, sliding into a corner booth where Nathan could sit facing the door. He carried his school backpack, nothing unusual about that, except I now knew it contained the digital recorder he'd been carrying for 2 years. My grandson had learned to think like someone who expected betrayal, and that broke my heart even as it impressed me. Jennifer walked in exactly on time, and I barely recognized her. Gone was the exhausted young woman in a stained waitress uniform. This Jennifer wore an expensive-looking business suit, carried a designer purse, and moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent years learning how to present herself. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup perfect, her smile bright and practiced. She looked like success. She looked like someone who'd never struggled to pay bills or abandoned a child because he was too much work. Nathan. Her voice caught slightly as she approached our table. My goodness, look how tall you've gotten. You look so much like your father. Nathan didn't stand up or move to hug her. He just studied her with those intelligent brown eyes that had learned to see through pretense. Hello, Jennifer. The use of her first name instead of Mom wasn't lost on any of us. Jennifer's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. May I sit down? Nathan gestured to the seat across from him. Of course. This is your old workplace, isn't it? Do you remember working here? I do remember. Jennifer slid into the booth, looking around the familiar diner with what might have been genuine nostalgia. It feels like a lifetime ago. It was a lifetime ago. My lifetime. Nathan's voice remained calm, conversational. I was 7 when you worked here. Do you remember what you told me about this place? Jennifer's eyes flickered with something that might have been caution. I'm sure I told you lots of things. I don't remember specifically. You told me that working here was temporary, that you were saving money so we could get our own apartment, just the 2 of us. You said we'd have a real kitchen where you could cook my favorite meals and a backyard where I could play without bothering the neighbors. I watched Jennifer's face carefully. She was trying to look touched by the memory, but I could see the calculation underneath. She was already trying to figure out how to use Nathan's words against us. I did want those things for us, she said softly. I had so many dreams about the life we could build together. But instead, you brought me to Grandpa Frank's house and left me there. Do you remember what you said that day? Nathan, I was very young and very overwhelmed. I said things I didn't mean, made choices I regret. But I've grown so much since then. I've learned so much about myself, about what it means to be a good parent. Nathan reached into his backpack and pulled out a notebook. Not the digital recorder, just a simple spiral notebook with a blue cover. I've been keeping track of things I remember. Would you like to hear some of them? Jennifer glanced at me, then back at Nathan. Sure, honey. I'd love to hear your memories. Nathan opened the notebook to a page marked with a yellow sticky note. October 15th, 2014. That was the day you left me with Grandpa Frank. Do you remember what you said when I asked why you were leaving? Nathan, I'm sure I explained that I needed some time to get my life together. You said, I can't do this anymore. I'm 22 years old. I should be figuring out my own life, not dealing with a child who requires special everything. Nathan read the words without emotion, like he was reading a grocery list. Do you remember saying that? Jennifer's face went pale. Nathan, you were 7 years old. You couldn't possibly remember exact words. I remember everything. Nathan flipped to another page. You also said, he needs more than I can give him. He needs someone who can handle his issues, someone who has patience for all his quirks and problems. Honey, those words were taken out of context. I was having a breakdown. Nathan continued reading. When I asked you when you were coming back, you said, I'm not coming back. This is better for everyone. You get the grandson you always wanted to spoil, and I get my life back. The diner suddenly felt very quiet. Even the usual clatter of dishes and conversation seemed muted. Jennifer sat frozen, staring at her son as he recited her words from 9 years ago with perfect accuracy. Nathan, I said gently, maybe we should... It's okay, Grandpa Frank. I think Jennifer deserves to hear all of it. Nathan turned another page. December 23rd, 2014. I called you from Grandpa Frank's house to ask if you were coming for Christmas. Do you remember what you said? Jennifer's hands were trembling now. Nathan, I think you're misremembering. You said, I can't handle being around you right now. Maybe when you're older and less difficult, we can try again. Nathan looked up from his notebook. I was 8 years old, and I spent Christmas wondering what I'd done to make my mother think I was too difficult to love. That's not what I meant. March 8th, 2015, my 9th birthday. I called to ask if you were coming to my party. You said, I'm dating someone new now and he doesn't need the complication of dealing with my ex-problems. Nathan's voice remained steady, but I could see the pain flickering in his eyes. You called me your ex-problem. Jennifer was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who'd been caught and was desperately trying to find an escape route. Nathan, you have to understand. I was in a very dark place back then. I was seeing a therapist who told me it was okay to put my own mental health first. I was trying to get better so I could be the mother you deserved. For 9 years. Nathan closed the notebook. It took you 9 years to get better, because I have records of every time I tried to contact you, every birthday, every Christmas, every time I had a school event where other kids' parents came and I hoped maybe you'd show up. I was protecting you from seeing me when I wasn't at my best. You were protecting yourself from dealing with a child who didn't fit into your idea of what life should be. Nathan's composure finally cracked slightly. Do you want to know what the worst part was? Not the abandonment, not even the cruel things you said. The worst part was wondering every single day if there was something wrong with me that made my own mother give up on me. Jennifer reached across the table toward Nathan's hand. Honey, there was never anything wrong with you. Nathan pulled his hand away. Don't touch me. And don't call me honey. You lost the right to pet names when you walked out of Grandpa Frank's kitchen 9 years ago. Nathan, I know I made mistakes, but I'm here now. I want to make things right. I want us to be a family again. Now you want to be a family, after 9 years of silence, after 9 years of me growing up believing I was fundamentally unlovable. Nathan leaned back in the booth. What changed, Jennifer? What suddenly made you realize you wanted to be my mother again? Jennifer's tears had stopped. Now she was looking at Nathan with something that might have been frustration. I heard you've been doing well for yourself. I heard you've developed some kind of business venture that's been successful. As your mother, I have a responsibility to make sure you're being properly guided." "There it is." Nathan smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. "You heard about the money. This isn't about money. Everything is about money with you. It always has been." Nathan opened his backpack again, and this time he did pull out the digital recorder. A small device that looked innocuous sitting on the table between them. "What is that?" Jennifer asked. "Insurance," Nathan said. "Tell me, Jennifer, what exactly do you want? Not the therapeutic language about rebuilding relationships and being a family. What do you actually want?" Jennifer's mask finally slipped completely. The practiced warmth disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "I want what's best for my son, and what's best for him is having proper legal oversight of his financial affairs. 16-year-olds shouldn't be making investment decisions that could affect their entire future. So you want to control my money? I want to protect your money from people who might take advantage of your youth and inexperience." Nathan glanced at me, then back at his mother. "People like Grandpa Frank? The man who raised me when you couldn't be bothered? The man who believed in me when everyone else said I was a problem child? The man who helped me turn my difficulties into the foundation for success? Your grandfather is a good man, but he's not qualified to manage significant financial assets. You need professional guidance, legal protection, adult supervision from someone who has your best interests at heart. And you think that person is you? The woman who called me her ex-problem and told me I was too difficult to love." Jennifer's composure cracked entirely. "I never said you were too difficult to love." Nathan pressed a button on the digital recorder. Suddenly, Jennifer's voice filled the diner, younger, more desperate, but unmistakably hers. "I can't do this anymore. I'm 22 years old. I should be figuring out my own life, not dealing with a child who requires special everything." Jennifer stared at the recorder in horror. "Where did you get that?" Nathan pressed another button. This time it was her voice from our phone conversation just days ago. "A 16-year-old shouldn't be making major monetary decisions without proper legal oversight." "You recorded our conversation?" "I record everything now," Nathan said quietly. "I learned that from you. I learned that people say things they later claim they never said. I learned that the only way to protect yourself from liars is to keep evidence of their lies." Jennifer looked around the diner desperately, as if searching for an escape route. "You can't use those recordings. They're illegal." "Actually, they're not. I researched the law very carefully. In this state, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation, and since I was party to all of these conversations, they're perfectly legal." Nathan's voice carried the confidence of someone who'd done his homework. "Just like the algorithm I created. Just like everything else I've accomplished, despite being too difficult for my mother to handle." Jennifer's face had gone from pale to red. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've got everything figured out. But I'm still your mother, Nathan. I still have legal rights. Courts don't care about your little recordings or your hurt feelings. They care about what's best for children, and what's best for you is having proper adult guidance." Nathan stood up, shouldering his backpack. "You're right about one thing, Jennifer. I do think I'm smart. Smart enough to build something remarkable with the grandfather who loved me unconditionally. Smart enough to protect what we've built from people who want to destroy it. And smart enough to make sure you never hurt me or him again." He looked down at her, this woman who'd given birth to him but had never been his mother in any way that mattered. "Enjoy the rest of your life, Jennifer, but enjoy it somewhere far away from ours." As we walked toward the door, I heard Jennifer call after us, her voice shrill with desperation and rage. "This isn't over. I'll see you in court. I'll fight for what's mine." Nathan paused at the door and turned back to her one last time. "Nothing about me was ever yours, Jennifer. You made sure of that 9 years ago." Outside in the parking lot, I looked at my grandson with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. "Are you okay?" Nathan took a deep breath of the cool autumn air. "I'm perfect, Grandpa Frank. For the first time in my life, I'm absolutely perfect." But I could see him calculating, planning, preparing for the war that was coming. And I realized that the boy who'd been abandoned for being too difficult was about to show the world exactly how formidable he could be when someone threatened the family he'd chosen. The courthouse smelled like old wood and broken dreams. I sat in the gallery behind Nathan, watching my 16-year-old grandson adjust his tie with hands that were steadier than mine had been all morning. 3 weeks had passed since our confrontation at Morrison's diner. 3 weeks of Jennifer's lawyer, sending threatening letters and filing motions that made my head spin. Our attorney, Sarah Chen, was a family law specialist who'd come highly recommended, but even she seemed concerned about the case. The biological parent has significant advantages in custody disputes, she'd warned us during our initial consultation, especially when there's substantial money involved. Courts tend to err on the side of reunifying families, even when the circumstances are complicated. Complicated. That was the legal system's word for a mother who'd abandoned her child for 9 years and then returned when he became wealthy. Jennifer sat at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, David Morrison. No relation to the diner, just an unfortunate coincidence that made my stomach turn every time I heard his name. She'd dressed conservatively for court, playing the role of the reformed mother seeking reconnection with her child. Her makeup was subtle, her hair pulled back in a respectable bun, her expression carefully composed to suggest maternal concern rather than financial greed. David Morrison was a different breed entirely. Expensive suit, silver hair, the kind of commanding presence that came from years of convincing judges that black was white and wrong was right. He'd built his reputation on high-stakes custody cases, and Jennifer had somehow found the money to hire him. I wondered where that money had come from, since 3 weeks ago she'd been demanding access to Nathan's accounts because she supposedly needed proper legal oversight of his finances. "Your Honor," Morrison began, rising from his chair with practiced authority, "this case represents a fundamental question about children's rights and parental responsibility. My client, Jennifer Walsh, is seeking to restore her relationship with her son after a period of necessary separation, during which she addressed personal challenges that had temporarily impaired her ability to parent effectively. Necessary separation. I wanted to stand up and scream that abandoning a 7-year-old wasn't a necessary separation. It was cruelty of the highest order. But Sarah had warned me that any outbursts would hurt our case. Ms. Walsh has spent the past 9 years in therapy, addressing the postpartum depression and anxiety that led to her initial struggles with parenting. She's now in a stable relationship, has completed her education, and is financially secure in her own right. She's not seeking to disrupt Nathan's relationship with his grandfather, but rather to restore the natural bond between mother and child that was temporarily severed during her period of illness. Illness, another euphemism for abandonment. I glanced at Nathan, who was taking notes in a leather portfolio, his expression unreadable. Over the past 3 weeks, he'd transformed from a teenager into something more calculating and mature. The boy who'd once cried because his mother didn't want him had become a young man who understood exactly how much power knowledge could give him. Morrison continued his opening statement, painting Jennifer as a victim of circumstances beyond her control, who'd made the difficult but responsible decision to place Nathan with family while she recovered. He spoke about her painful sacrifice and her years of agonizing separation from the child she loved but couldn't properly care for. It was a masterful performance, and I could see some of the gallery members nodding sympathetically. The story Morrison told wasn't technically false. It was just missing every crucial detail that would reveal Jennifer's true character. When Sarah Chen stood to present our side, I held my breath. "Your Honor, this case is indeed about children's rights. Specifically, it's about Nathan Walsh's right not to be traumatized again by a biological parent who views him as a financial opportunity rather than a beloved child." She moved to the evidence table and picked up a thick folder. Over the past 9 years, Nathan Walsh has attempted to contact his mother 47 times. Birthdays, holidays, school events, medical emergencies. 47 attempts to maintain a relationship with the woman who gave birth to him. Ms. Walsh responded to exactly 0 of those attempts. Sarah opened the folder, revealing phone records, letters, and emails that Nathan had carefully preserved over the years. This isn't a case about a mother who made a difficult sacrifice and then worked to rebuild her relationship with her child. This is a case about a woman who abandoned her son completely and only returned when she learned he'd become financially successful. "Objection," Morrison called out. "Counsel is making unsupported assumptions about my client's motivations." "Sustained," Judge Harrison replied. "Ms. Chen, please stick to the facts." Sarah nodded. "The facts, Your Honor, will show that Miss Walsh's sudden interest in rebuilding her relationship with Nathan began exactly 1 week after news of his business success became public. The facts will show that her first conversation with Nathan's grandfather in over 2 years focused immediately on proper legal oversight of Nathan's finances. And the facts will show that Nathan himself has compelling reasons to believe his mother's interest is financial rather than maternal. Judge Harrison leaned forward. "Ms. Chen, I assume you have evidence to support these claims." "We do, Your Honor, including recordings made by Nathan himself, which demonstrate both his mother's historical pattern of rejection and her current financial motivations." Morrison was on his feet immediately. "Your Honor, any recordings made without proper consent were made in full compliance with state law," Sarah interrupted. "Nathan was a party to all recorded conversations, and this state requires only single-party consent for recording." Judge Harrison nodded. "I'll allow the recordings, subject to authentication. Mr. Morrison, you'll have opportunity to challenge their admissibility during your cross-examination." The judge looked at Nathan, who'd been sitting quietly throughout the opening statements. "Young man, I understand you're 16 years old?" Nathan stood. "Yes, Your Honor. In cases involving minors of your age, the court typically considers the child's preferences regarding custody arrangements. Are you prepared to testify about your wishes in this matter?" "I am, Your Honor." Judge Harrison's expression softened slightly. "I know this is difficult for you, son. The court's only interest is in determining what arrangement serves your best interests. Do you understand that?" "I understand, Your Honor, and I appreciate that the court wants to protect children, but I also hope the court will consider that some children need protection from their biological parents, not reunification with them." A murmur went through the gallery. Morrison looked like he'd been slapped, while Jennifer's carefully composed expression cracked for just a moment, revealing something uglier underneath. Judge Harrison studied Nathan carefully. "That's a very serious statement, young man. I assume you're prepared to support it with evidence." "Yes, Your Honor. 9 years' worth of evidence." Sarah called Nathan to the witness stand, and I watched my grandson walk to the front of the courtroom with the confidence of someone who'd been preparing for this moment his entire life. The court clerk swore him in, and Nathan placed his hand on the Bible with the solemnity of someone who understood that truth was about to become his most powerful weapon. "Nathan," Sarah began gently, "can you tell the court about the last conversation you remember having with your mother before she left you with your grandfather?" Nathan looked directly at Jennifer as he answered. "She told me I was too difficult, that she needed to get her life back and that she wasn't coming back. When I asked her why she didn't want me, she said that love isn't always enough." "And how old were you at that time?" 7 years old. "After your mother left, did you attempt to maintain contact with her?" "Yes, I called her every birthday and every Christmas for the first 3 years. I sent her drawings from school, report cards when I got good grades, invitations to school plays and science fairs. I wrote her letters telling her about my friends, my interests, my dreams. I never received a single response." Sarah moved to the evidence table. "Nathan, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit A through G. Can you identify these items?" Nathan looked at the folders of evidence he'd carefully assembled over the years. "Those are copies of all my attempts to contact my mother. Letters, emails, phone records showing calls that went to voicemail, greeting cards I sent that were never acknowledged. During the 9 years you lived with your grandfather, how many times did your mother visit you?" 0 times. "How many times did she call to check on your well-being?" 0 times. "How many times did she attend school events, medical appointments, or other activities where parental support would have been meaningful?" 0 times. Sarah paused, letting the weight of those zeros settle over the courtroom. "Nathan, can you tell the court about your academic and personal achievements during the time you've lived with your grandfather?" Nathan straightened in his chair. "I've maintained a 4.0 grade point average throughout high school. I've been accepted to MIT's early admission program. I've created a proprietary algorithmic trading system that has generated substantial financial returns. I've also completed community service projects, learned to play piano, and participated in debate team and academic competitions." "And who supported you through these achievements?" "My grandfather. He attended every school event, helped with homework even when he didn't understand the subject matter, drove me to competitions, celebrated my successes, and helped me learn from my failures. He never once made me feel like I was too difficult or too much work." Morrison objected to the characterization, but Judge Harrison overruled him. Sarah continued, "Nathan, when did your mother first contact you after 9 years of silence?" 3 weeks ago. 1 week after news of my business success became public. And what was the focus of that conversation? Nathan's voice remained steady. She claimed she wanted to rebuild our relationship, but the conversation quickly turned to concerns about proper legal oversight of my finances. She made it clear that she believed I was too young to make financial decisions without adult supervision. Adult supervision from whom? From her. She said, as my biological mother, she had a responsibility to protect my financial interests. Sarah walked to the evidence table and picked up Nathan's digital recorder. Nathan, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit H. Can you identify this device? That's a digital recorder I've carried with me for the past 2 years. Why have you been carrying a recorder? Nathan looked directly at Jennifer. Because my grandfather taught me that some people rewrite history to suit their purposes. I wanted to make sure I had accurate records of any future contact with my mother, in case she ever tried to claim she'd been a loving parent who was prevented from seeing me. The courtroom went completely silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. Nathan, Sarah said softly, I'm going to play some recordings for the court. These are from your recent conversations with your mother. Are you prepared to hear them again? Nathan nodded. I'm prepared. Sarah activated the audio system, and suddenly Jennifer's voice filled the courtroom. Not the carefully modulated voice of the reformed mother seeking reconciliation, but the cold, calculating voice of someone discussing financial assets. A 16-year-old shouldn't be making major monetary decisions without proper legal oversight. As his mother, I have a responsibility to make sure that happens. Then came the recording from 9 years ago, preserved with the clarity that only a child's perfect memory could provide. I can't do this anymore. I'm 22 years old. I should be figuring out my own life, not dealing with a child who requires special everything. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Jennifer and saw that her carefully constructed facade had finally collapsed completely. She was staring at Nathan with something that looked like hatred, as if he'd betrayed her rather than simply told the truth. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying the papers before him. Ms. Chen, do you have additional evidence to present? Just one more exhibit, Your Honor. Sarah handed Nathan a manila folder. Nathan, can you tell the court what this contains? Nathan opened the folder. Financial records showing my mother's current income, employment history, and recent expenditures, including the retainer she paid to Mr. Morrison, which exceeded her total reported income for the past 6 months. Morrison was on his feet immediately. Objection! How did they obtain my client's private financial information? Nathan smiled for the first time all day. The same way I built my trading algorithm, Your Honor, by using publicly available information that most people don't know how to access or analyze. Everything in this folder came from public records, credit reports that Ms. Walsh authorized when she applied for various loans, and employment verification databases, all perfectly legal. Judge Harrison examined the documents. And what do these records show, Nathan? They show that my mother is currently unemployed, has been evicted from 2 apartments in the past year, and has accumulated significant debt. They also show that she somehow found $40,000 to pay Mr. Morrison's retainer, despite having no visible income source. The judge looked at Morrison. Counselor, how does your client explain the discrepancy between her claimed financial stability and these records? Morrison was sweating now. Your Honor, my client's financial situation is not relevant to her parental rights. It is when she's claiming that her interest in her son is maternal rather than financial, Judge Harrison replied dryly. Nathan, do you have any other evidence to present? Nathan stood up in the witness box, and for a moment he looked like the 7-year-old boy who'd been abandoned in my kitchen. But when he spoke, his voice carried the strength of someone who'd survived the worst betrayal possible and emerged stronger. Your Honor, I have one final piece of evidence, not a recording or a document, but a question. He looked directly at Jennifer. If my mother truly wants to rebuild our relationship, if she truly loves me and has spent 9 years missing me and working to become a better person, then she should be able to answer basic questions about who I am. Judge Harrison raised an eyebrow. What kind of questions? What's my favorite color? What subject do I struggle with in school? What are my career goals? What's my biggest fear? What makes me laugh? What food am I allergic to? What's the name of my best friend? Nathan's voice grew stronger with each question. These are things any parent would know about their child, things my grandfather could answer without hesitation. He turned to face his mother directly. Jennifer, can you answer any of those questions? The courtroom waited. Jennifer opened her mouth, closed it, then looked desperately at Morrison, who could only shrug helplessly. I've been away for a long time," she finally whispered. "Yes," Nathan agreed. "You have, by choice. For 9 years, you chose not to know me, not to love me, not to be part of my life. And now that I've become successful despite everything you put me through, you want to choose me again. But I get to choose too, Your Honor, and I choose the family that chose me when I needed them most." Nathan looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the love and gratitude that had sustained us both through 9 years of building something beautiful from the wreckage of abandonment. I choose my grandfather, who taught me that being different isn't being broken. I choose the man who believed in me when everyone else said I was too difficult. I choose the family we built together, based on love and respect and shared dreams, rather than the accident of biology that connects me to someone who sees me as a source of income, rather than a human being worthy of love. Judge Harrison was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many broken families to have any illusions left. "This court will recess for 30 minutes while I review the evidence. When we reconvene, I'll render my decision." As the courtroom emptied around us, Nathan remained in the witness box, looking at Jennifer with something that might have been pity. "You could have had everything," he said quietly. "You could have watched me grow up, seen me overcome my challenges, shared in my successes. You could have been proud of the man I became despite the foundation you tried to destroy. Instead, you chose to see me as a problem when I was 7 and a paycheck when I was 16. That choice was yours, Jennifer, and now the consequences are yours too." Jennifer stared at him for a moment longer, then stood and walked out of the courtroom without a word. Morrison gathered his papers and followed her, looking like a man who'd just learned that all the legal expertise in the world couldn't overcome the simple truth. Nathan climbed down from the witness stand and sat beside me in the gallery. "How do you think it went?" he asked. I put my arm around my grandson, this remarkable young man who'd turned abandonment into strength, rejection into resilience, and pain into purpose. "I think," I said, "that you just showed the world what real family looks like." Judge Harrison returned to the courtroom exactly 30 minutes later, carrying a single sheet of paper that would determine the rest of our lives. The gallery had filled again, but Jennifer was nowhere to be seen. Morrison sat alone at the plaintiff's table, looking like a man who knew he was about to lose more than just a case. "Will the parties please rise?" Judge Harrison said, his voice carrying the formal weight of legal authority. Nathan and I stood beside Sarah Chen while Morrison rose reluctantly at his table. The judge looked at his notes one final time, then directly at Nathan. "In my 23 years on the family court bench, I've presided over hundreds of custody cases. I've seen parents fight bitterly over children they claim to love, and I've seen children caught in the crossfire of adult failures. But I've rarely seen a case where the evidence was as clear-cut as what's been presented today." He set down his papers and folded his hands. "Nathan Walsh, you are 16 years old, which means this court must consider your best interests in determining custody arrangements. However, given your age, maturity level, and the compelling nature of your testimony, your preferences carry significant weight in this decision." Nathan remained perfectly still, but I could feel the tension radiating from him. "The court finds that Jennifer Walsh voluntarily terminated her parental relationship with her son 9 years ago through a pattern of complete abandonment. This was not a temporary separation due to circumstances beyond her control, as her counsel suggested. This was a deliberate decision to relinquish all parental responsibilities to the child's grandfather." Morrison shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. "Furthermore, the court finds that Ms. Walsh's recent attempts to regain custody were motivated primarily by financial considerations rather than genuine maternal concern. The timing of her renewed interest, coinciding precisely with news of Nathan's financial success, combined with her immediate focus on oversight of his assets, demonstrates a pattern of treating this child as a financial opportunity rather than a human being deserving of love and protection." Judge Harrison picked up the folder of evidence Nathan had compiled. "This court is particularly troubled by the complete absence of any maternal contact during Nathan's formative years. No birthday calls, no Christmas cards, no attempts to maintain even minimal connection with her child. This represents a level of abandonment that goes beyond temporary circumstances and enters the realm of deliberate rejection." I felt Nathan's shoulders relax slightly beside me. The court is also impressed by the evidence of Nathan's remarkable achievements under his grandfather's care: academic excellence, personal growth, financial success, and most importantly, emotional stability and maturity that are clearly the result of consistent, loving guidance over many years. Judge Harrison looked directly at Nathan. "Young man, you've demonstrated wisdom and resilience that many adults never achieve. Your testimony was compelling not because of any legal technicalities, but because of its fundamental honesty and emotional truth." He turned his attention to our table. "Frank Walsh, you've provided your grandson with something that no court order can mandate, and no biological relationship can guarantee: unconditional love and unwavering support. You've taken a child who was labeled difficult and helped him discover that his differences were actually strengths. That's not just good parenting, that's heroic parenting." The judge's voice grew formal again. "Therefore, this court hereby denies Jennifer Walsh's petition for custody modification. Nathan Walsh will remain in the full legal custody of his grandfather, Frank Walsh, with no visitation rights granted to the biological mother, absent future circumstances that demonstrate genuine rehabilitation and the child's express consent." Nathan sagged against me with relief so profound I could feel it in my bones. 9 years of fear that someday Jennifer might return and destroy the life we'd built together, were finally over. But Judge Harrison wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court is issuing a restraining order prohibiting Jennifer Walsh from contacting Nathan Walsh, directly or indirectly, from approaching his school or residence, and from making any future claims on his financial assets or business interests. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and prosecution. Morrison stood shakily. "Your Honor, my client has already left the building and will not be contesting this decision." "Wise choice, Counselor. This case is closed." As the courtroom began to empty, Nathan and I sat in our seats for a moment, letting the reality sink in. After 9 years of uncertainty, we finally had legal certainty that no one could take away what we'd built together. Sarah Chen gathered her papers and smiled at us. "That was one of the most satisfying victories I've ever had in family court. Nathan, your testimony was extraordinary. You didn't just defend yourself. You defended the principle that families are made by love, not biology." Nathan shook her hand formally. "Thank you for believing in us. Thank you for reminding me why I became a family lawyer in the first place." Outside the courthouse, the autumn air felt crisp and clean, like the world had been washed fresh by the morning's events. Nathan and I walked to my truck in comfortable silence, both of us processing what had just happened. "Grandpa Frank," Nathan said as we reached the parking lot, "there's something I need to tell you." My heart skipped. After everything we'd just been through, I wasn't sure I could handle any more revelations. "What's that?" Nathan smiled, and for the first time in weeks it was the uncomplicated smile of a teenager, rather than the calculated expression of someone fighting for his future. "I've made a decision about the money, about what I want to do with it. Okay, I want to set up a trust fund. Not for me, for you. Enough money to make sure you never have to worry about anything again. The best healthcare, travel if you want it, hobbies, whatever makes you happy. You've spent 9 years sacrificing for me, and now I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you're taken care of." I stopped walking. "Nathan, that's not necessary." "Yes, it is." His voice carried the quiet determination I'd learned to recognize as non-negotiable. "For 9 years, you've been my father in every way that matters. You taught me that love isn't about biology. It's about showing up every single day, believing in someone when they can't believe in themselves, and never giving up even when things get difficult." We reached the truck, but neither of us moved to get in. "You know what the best part is?" Nathan continued. "Jennifer was right about one thing. I am difficult. I do require special patience and understanding. My brain works differently than most people's, and that comes with challenges as well as advantages. Nathan, but you never saw my differences as problems to be solved. You saw them as gifts to be developed. When I couldn't sit still in class, you didn't drug me into compliance. You found me outlets for my energy. When I hyper-focused on computers for hours, you didn't force me to be more well-rounded. You bought me better equipment and encouraged my passion." I felt tears stinging my eyes. "You were never difficult, Nathan. You were just Nathan." "Exactly, and that's why I succeeded. Because you loved Nathan, not some imaginary version of me that would be easier to handle. Jennifer wanted a normal child who would fit into her vision of what motherhood should be. You wanted me exactly as I was, and you helped me become the best version of myself." Nathan pulled out his phone and showed me a document he'd already prepared. "I've set up the Frank Walsh Education Foundation. It provides scholarships and support for children with learning differences, kids like me who just need someone to believe in them and help them find their strengths." I stared at the screen through blurry eyes. "Nathan, this is incredible. There's more. I've also established a fund to support grandparents and other relatives who take in children when parents can't or won't care for them. Because there are other kids out there like me and other grandparents like you, and they deserve support for doing something extraordinary." We stood in the courthouse parking lot, grandfather and grandson, looking at a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. 9 years ago, Jennifer had abandoned Nathan because she couldn't handle the responsibility of loving a difficult child. Today, that same child had used his supposed difficulties to build something that would help countless other children and families. "I have one more surprise," Nathan said, grinning now. "I bought us a house." "You what?" "A big house with a workshop for you, and a proper computer lab for me, and a kitchen where we can cook together, and a yard where we can throw a baseball like we used to. It's in the same neighborhood where I went to elementary school, so I can bike past Mrs. Henderson's house and thank her for being kind to the weird kid with ADHD." I laughed through my tears. "Nathan, we don't need a big house. Maybe not, but I want one anyway. I want a place where we can host holidays for the friends who became our family. I want guest rooms for the cousins who actually want to visit. I want a dining room big enough for Sarah Chen and her family, because she fought for us today, and that makes her family too." Nathan stepped closer and put his hand on my shoulder. At 16, he was already taller than me, but in that moment he looked exactly like the 7-year-old boy who'd cried in my kitchen while his mother drove away. "Most of all, I want a home where we can invite other kids who need what you gave me. Foster kids, kids with learning differences, kids whose parents can't or won't love them properly. I want to show them what you showed me, that families aren't just about biology. They're about choice and love and showing up every single day." I pulled my grandson into a hug that lasted long enough for the courthouse parking lot to empty around us. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered. "I'm proud of us," Nathan corrected. "We did this together, Grandpa Frank, all of it. The success, the survival, the victory in there today. We built something beautiful out of the wreckage Jennifer left behind." As we drove home, to the modest house where we'd built our life together, where Nathan had created his algorithm, where we'd learned that love really is enough when it's real and consistent and unconditional, I thought about the strange turns life can take. 9 years ago, Jennifer had called Nathan her problem and walked away because loving him required more effort than she was willing to give. Today, that same boy had proven that love and patience and belief can transform supposed weaknesses into extraordinary strengths. Tomorrow, we'd start looking at the big house Nathan wanted to buy. We'd begin planning the foundation that would help other children like him. We'd continue building the algorithm that had started as a teenager's experiment and had become a tool for creating generational wealth. But tonight, we'd order pizza and work on Nathan's college applications, because even teenage millionaires have homework to finish. We'd sit in our familiar kitchen and talk about ordinary things, because that's what families do. They show up for the mundane moments as well as the triumphant ones. Jennifer had been wrong about everything. Nathan wasn't difficult. He was extraordinary. Love wasn't insufficient. It was transformative. And families weren't just about biology. They were about choice, commitment, and the daily decision to see the best in each other even when the world couldn't see it yet. As Nathan pulled out his laptop to show me the latest market analysis from his algorithm, I realized that we'd won more than just a custody case today. We'd proven that sometimes the greatest victories come not from fighting against the hand you're dealt, but from building something beautiful with the cards you choose to keep. And the card I'd chosen to keep, this remarkable young man who'd been abandoned for being too much, had turned out to be the winning hand all along.